Welcome to Shoe Leather Faith. My name is Robert McMillan, and we're going to continue on with our issue of child discipline. Children, gifts of God or gremlins? Your decision. So last time we looked into our responsibility to train our children. We've got a big responsibility because they start off with nothing. And everything they get, we've got to give it to them, at least at first. Remember this, we cannot protect our children's innocence, but we can help them preserve their purity. Purity and innocence are not the same thing. We can't put them in an environment where they never hear a curse word, or see someone cheating, or see someone lying. So let me say it once again. I want you to drive this into the frontal lobes of your mind. We cannot protect our children's innocence. The world is fallen. Our children are fallen. We cannot protect our children's innocence, but we can help them preserve their purity. That helps them make decisions about what they're going to do with what they see in the world. If we try to protect their innocence by shielding them from anything potentially harmful, we stand the good chance to send them into the world as unarmed and naive targets for false teachers and false teaching. Let me tell you a story. It's about a man who lived about 2,500 years ago. He lived a sheltered life in Kepelavatsu, and I probably didn't pronounce that right. Kepelavatsu. Say that 3 times. Kepelavatsu in northern India, or what is modern-day Nepal. His father determined to shelter him from all forms of human suffering. So he was kept inside a palace. He was fed all the good foods. He never went hungry. He never did without. At the age of 29, he ventured out of his palace into the countryside, and he saw an elderly man. He was stunned. He'd never seen death. So he came back in. And then again later on, he made several trips into his lands, and it caused him to see 1, a diseased man, 2, a decaying corpse, and 3, an ascetic man. All he knew was the sheltered existence of his palace. He was ill-prepared to cope with these exceptions to his life and lifestyle. It didn't compute with all he had learned in his life. At the age of 35, this man, whose name was Siddhartha announced that he had been enlightened by having overcome universal conditions of ignorance, greed, and hatred. As you and I know, that's all characteristics of the sin nature. Although he did not believe that men could learn the way of enlightenment, he was convinced to teach the fourfold path to enlightenment. He later became known as the Buddha, and his religion was Buddhism. His name was Siddhartha Gautama. Later he's called Gautama Buddha, or Gautama, the enlightened one, or awakened one. If his story is true, and there's no certainty that it's true, but it's the company line of Buddhism, his father did him no favor, since the results led him away from the one true God and reality, which was death, sin, destruction, and it led him towards false teaching, that a person could overcome his sin nature through personal enlightenment. And we know that's not true. But we do have a responsibility to shelter our children up to a point. We can't pack them in Excelsior and pretend that they're never going to be bumped in life. They're never going to go to school and meet a bully. They're never going to go to school and fail a test. I've failed my share of them. So let's look at some of the ways we shelter our children. Physically, we're to shelter them. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 14, the Apostle Paul is talking to a church, but he's using an example of family life and responsibility to press home a point. Now for the 3rd time I'm ready to come to you, and I will not be burdensome to you. For I do not seek yours, but you. For the children ought not to lay up for the parents, but the parents for the children. Paul's saying, my responsibility is to lay up for you. I'm supposed to provide for you because I'm the father of this church. The Apostle Paul is just using a generally accepted truth to make a point about his relationship to the Corinthian church. In 1 Timothy 5:8, Paul tells the young man Timothy, if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Doesn't provide for his own. The word provide, it means to look forward, to see beforehand. Are you planning for your children? What school are they going to go into? Are you going to homeschool them? Are they going to go to a Christian school? Are they going to go to public school? Which public school? So we're to protect our children and plan ahead for their needs. We're also supposed to shelter them socially and sexually. Really? Yeah. Turn to Song of Solomon, chapter 8, verses 8 through 10. Song of Solomon, chapter 8, verses 8 through 10. The Song of Solomon is the only R-rated book in the Bible. It is a love poem. It's not really a poem about Christ and the church or Christ and Israel. A lot of people interpreted it that way because they didn't believe that God would talk like that. And so here it says, we have a little sister and she has no breasts. In other words, she's prepubescent. What shall we do for our sister in the day she is spoken for? What are we going to do for our sister when it's time for her to be engaged for marriage? If she's a wall, we will build upon her a battlement of silver. And if she's a door, we'll enclose her with boards of cedar. Walls and doors, what are we talking about? Well, a wall, you just can't get through it. If this family sees their little sister living in a protected environment and realizing she has something valuable to protect for marriage, and she is determined not to give that away, they will treat her like a wall. She's already got it. If she's a door, if she doesn't see the dangers, then they'll board her up. Now, realize this passage isn't talking about a sin issue. This is just about the realization of this young girl. How does she see herself? And so their responsibility is to shelter her where she is not seeing the need to be sheltered, or protecting her where she is vulnerable. A little bit later, she says in verse 10, I am a wall and my breasts like towers. Then I became in his eyes as one who found peace. In other words, she knew who she was. She knew she was going to protect her purity. And so the need to shelter this particular girl wasn't critical, because she was already programmed to be pure. We're supposed to shelter them mentally and emotionally. And now with television, social media, teaching in school, friends on the playground and friends on the way home from school or whatever, we need to be all the more carefully. In Philippians 4:8, it says, finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there's any virtue and if there's anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. We need to evaluate our children to see what they meditate on. What's important to them? Do they see truth around them? Have they picked it up from you? Our children should know, without our saying anything, that we would stop a bullet for them, that we would die for them. The more important thing, parents, would we live for them? Would we be a good example to them? Sheltering our children does not mean cocooning our children. Remember the story about Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. He was cocooned. He was protected from anything that was potentially harmful. You can't do that. So let me just leave you with this. Find out where your children's strengths are, and they're all different. You may have produced them all yourself, but they're all different. It's like they're adopted kids, because their personalities are different. Their understanding of right and wrong, good and evil might be different. They're going to develop differently. They're going to mature differently. And we need to be ready to shelter them only when we need to. We shelter them to encourage their purity, but we cannot protect their innocence. Thank you very much. I hope that you'll like this video and subscribe to the channel. Next week, I'm going to start on our responsibility to love them. And I think you'll enjoy that. Thank you.